Thank you for joining us. I am Matt Pillar, Chief Editor at BioProcess Online, host of the Business of Biotech podcast, and your guide for today's important BioProcess Online live conversation on building a resilient approach to pandemic preparedness. So we're a full 2 years into this shape-shifting pandemic, and while the past 24 months have produced plenty of biopharma bright spots, we've also tripped over a lot of obstacles along the way. Biopharmaceutical supply chains have been stressed, manufacturing capacity has been strained, vaccine and therapeutic rollouts have been cumbersome, public health agencies and the biopharma industry have, at times, been at odds in the public spotlight. The industry's resilience and mettle have been tested. And while it's likely premature to be conducting a full analysis of what's gone right and what's gone wrong, we all know that there's no time to waste in making the course adjustments and corrections that will put the biopharma industry on firmer footing when the next threat to public health arises. Today's BioProcess Online live event will present an objective forum for discussion among three execs who are on the front lines of improving our collective response to population-level health threats, such as the one we're in now. These aren't just talking heads. These three men are making daily decisions and deals with private investors, public health officials, and academics that will directly impact the way hundreds of innovative biopharma companies respond to public health emergencies, present and future. Adrian Wallis is Chief Strategy and Technology Officer at Lakes BioScience, a unique UK collaborative that's aiming to build the premier biopharma contract development and manufacturing operation in the nation. The company's vision has mustered much support from the UK Life Sciences Ministry to anchor a life sciences cluster there to improve regional resilience and build the nation's biopharma manufacturing capacity. John Weaver is President and CEO at Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives. MBI is an established and growing incubator of next-gen agile life sciences companies, having supported on the order of 100 startups with its novel approach to collaboration among academic, business, and government communities in Massachusetts and beyond. In his role there, John runs point on helping these innovative companies acquire the space and development resources they need to further their important work. And rounding out our panel is Jeff Wolf, founder and CEO at Heat Biologics. Now, from my purview as an industry observer, Heat is representative of an emerging bio company on the bleeding edge of positioning itself to respond resiliently to public health crises. As a case in point, Heat just recently announced the launch of its RapidVax novel cellular vaccine platform, which is purpose-built to target known and unknown emerging biological threats. The project has come together with support from Heat's Biothreat Advisory Board, comprised of academic and federal public health and biodefense experts. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us today. I want to begin the discussion by framing up where we stand, starting where we stand. So we're 2 years, as I said, into the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to ask your opinions in the express context of vaccine and therapeutic preparedness, development, and response. Again, not any of the extraneous parts of the conversation, but in the express context, vaccine, therapeutic preparedness, development, and response. How would you grade the performance of the public-private collective, i.e. the government / pharma / academic collaboration that we've seen to date? So your scale, I'm just going to give you a simple scale. A, perfect, through F, complete fail, and then we'll discuss why you applied that grade. Jeff, why don't we start with you? What would your if you're just throwing a number or a letter out there, as it were, what would your grade be?
Well, I'd actually graded incomplete. And I think we need to really understand what was done right in pandemic preparation and also what was done wrong. So I think certain things were, in my opinion, done right. So one was expedited approval through the EUA, accelerated clinical trials, which was important to address this pandemic. And also government support of novel modalities to address the disease. And I think going forward in the future, we need to replicate on these things that were done right and improve upon them. I think Congress should pass the proposed bill by Congressman Burr and Murray to promote national stockpiling and to promote pandemic response, which I think would be really excellent. And I think it's a very broad, encompassing bill. I think things could have been done better. One certainly was manufacturing and distribution. We've had many manufacturing issues and problems related to the vaccine and distribution issues. There could have been better preparation, I think, on everyone's part. And I also think that, after the approval of the first two vaccines, the government shouldn't have, or the first three vaccines, the government shouldn't have closed funding opportunities for future vaccines, because there are new modalities out there that address components that were not addressed by the first three vaccines out there. So I think that was truly a mistake, because as we see, these new emerging variants aren't being very well addressed by existing vaccines, and new vaccines aren't really on the horizon because funding has been curtailed for these vaccines. So I think we're much better prepared to address these issues in the future. But as for now, I give the whole process really an incomplete.
Yeah, that stands to reason. And Jeff, I can hear the collective new and emerging biopharma industry applauding the point you made around funding for new and novel vaccine efforts that target different regions of the virus than what we're seeing right now. I don't think you maybe with the exception of some big pharma players, I don't think you made many enemies with that statement. Adrian, I'm going to get the UK perspective. UK and global perspective. What grade would you give the effort?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and a lot of sort of resonance from Jeff's comments. I'd say we were kind of mid-scale, so somewhere around the sort of C. Some good examples. We could never claim to be perfect given the level of death that we've seen in the UK. I think the positive, though, is that connection between research, development, and bringing those through to manufacture. I think the regulatory authorities here in the UK, the MHRA, have performed excellently in terms of linking those things up and enabling the response to get vaccines and the initial therapeutic antibodies to patients. I think there has been some great learning around the supply chain. So we've certainly stress tested the supply chain. We know where some areas of thin supply chain responses, and we need to respond to that. So I think, look, some real positives. For me, I think we've got to build and improve, and I would say in the UK there is a very strong UK life sciences strategy that is responding to the pandemic learning. But as always, I think this public sort of focus has got to remain consistent. There is always a tendency, as we hopefully come on the downside of COVID-19, and we see hopefully the end of that we don't just then revert back to normal. We've got to learn from the last 2 years, and we've got to prepare for the next pandemic. There will be another pandemic, we all know that. And we've got to prepare that level of resilience. So I think the piece that I really want the UK to build on and improve is to take forward the sort of level of commitment and not let that drift into second and third order platitudes rather than real delivery.
When you say commitment, Adrian, when you say that you want to see the UK, for lack of a better word, better phrase, commit to that commitment, who are you specifically talking about, and give us some flavor on what that commitment might look like? Is it the funding issue? Is it the partnership issue?
So I think it's all aspects: funding, partnership, supply chain. In this sort of difficult period, I think people people, organisation, public, private, have pulled together and responded. But if you were to segment that now, the private industry and private funding needs to focus on broadly, a shorter term horizon. I think personally, public funding and government commitment needs to be focused on delivering strategy and the longer term resilience. It can't be that public health relies upon the nuances of private sort of investment. So I think it's a combined effort, but I do think that the public investment and the public health focus needs to be reinforced and maintained going forward.
Excellent. John, I want to kick it over to you and get your grade on this. And I can only assume, again, given Jeff's comments around perhaps the cutoff of funding and support to emerging innovative sponsor companies around new vaccine candidates. I've seen stats. I think that on the order of 100 vaccine candidates are still officially on pipelines globally. Despite the fact that here in the States, there are 3 approved, and I think globally 25, God knows what those are. But to that point, John, you're working every day over the years directly with, as I said, 100 startup biotech companies, many of them biopharma companies who, when an opportunity like this comes to bear, I'm sure there's a lot of excitement that is either going to it's either going to move forward or it's just going to stop. So your perspective is super interesting to me. You're working with these companies that are clamoring for pieces of solutions there at MBI. What are your thoughts from your perspective on where we would grade our effort and what we could do better?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. It's fun to be here with you, Jeff and Adrian. So, thanks for having me. I would say in a couple months in the beginning of 2020, every startup company was a COVID company for a while there, as everybody tried to figure out how they help address this. From a grading perspective on the pandemic, I'm a softie, I guess, and I'm going to give it an A- to a B+. But I'm kind of grading on a scale of past pandemic. Nobody was prepared for this. And I think it's key to kind of put that in the analysis. There were no contingency plans. There were no businesses in the industry, weren't getting prepared for a global pandemic of this size and nature. So, I think the fact that the industry was already set up for a kind of a mechanism where they moved innovation forward on their own privately with using the best technologies out of small startups and academia, where they already had those existing relationships with government to build partnerships to get through a regulatory process, makes what happened really that more miraculous. The fact that we were able to get a couple of vaccines on the market as quickly as we did, to me is just something we should all be extraordinarily proud of. And I think it comes down to a lot of those fundamental basics that the industry already empowered. To Jeff's point, I agree. I think there's a need to get more of those vaccines out there, and particularly with some of the more standard formats of vaccine therapeutics, because I think it might vaccination, it might just give more people the confidence to get vaccinated and help us improve that, vaccine uptake. But overall, I'm pretty bullish on the fact that what happened is pretty spectacular. Typically we're at the early stage, so we see where it takes companies 7 to 10 years and $1 billion to bring a product to market. So the fact that these technologies were that close, that ready, and we were able to get them out there as quickly as we did, I think we should be pretty proud of.